I heard my brother's voice through the wall before I could open my eyes. "Just sign it," he said. "Her name is already on it, we just need the date." The morphine made everything feel like cotton, but his words cut right through it. "My name is Meredith Cole. I'm 31 years old and I'm a forensic accountant. I say that not to brag, but because it matters. Because the same skills I use to catch embezzlement inside Fortune 500 companies are exactly what saved me when the people I grew up with decided my accident was an opportunity." 6 weeks before any of this, I was driving home from a late client meeting on I-40 outside Nashville. It was raining. A semi drifted across the lane divider. I don't remember the impact. I woke up 3 days later in Vanderbilt University Medical Center with a fractured pelvis, a collapsed lung, and no memory of the previous 72 hours. The accident wasn't my fault. My insurance, both health and auto, was comprehensive. I'd made sure of that. I work with enough clients who lose everything over a single gap in coverage that I treat insurance like religion. What I didn't insure against was my own family. My brother is 4 years older than me. We were never close, not because we fought constantly, but because he always treated me like a variable in his own equation. When I got a scholarship to UT, he called it lucky. When I passed my CPA exam on the first try, he said the test must have gotten easier. When I bought my house at 28, a 3-bedroom Craftsman in East Nashville with a detached garage I'd converted into a proper home office, he toured it once, looked around and said, "You know this neighborhood is gonna peak soon. You should have bought 2 years ago." He could never just let a thing be good. My sister-in-law is worse, in the particular way that people are worse when they're performing niceness. She brings casseroles when she wants something. She uses the word we when she means I. She once told me over Easter dinner that she thought it was sad I lived alone. I told her I had a dog. She said that's what she meant. My parents are not bad people. I want to be careful about that. They're just shaped by my brother. He's the oldest, the one who stayed local, the one who shows up for Sunday dinners and fixes their gutters in October. I left for college and didn't come back in the way they expected. They love me, I think, but when I was lying in that hospital bed and couldn't speak for myself, they defaulted to him. They always default to him. He had power of attorney drawn up within 48 hours of my accident. I found out later, much later, that he'd called a family attorney he knew from his real estate work, explained that his sister was incapacitated with no spouse and no children, and framed the document as a precaution so bills could be paid. The attorney should have pushed back harder. He didn't. My parents signed as witnesses because my brother told them it was standard procedure, and they trusted him because he always sounds like he knows what he's doing. What he did with that document was not standard procedure. By the time I was conscious enough to hold a real conversation, he had already contacted my property manager about my rental income stream. I own a small duplex 2 blocks from Belmont University that I rent to graduate students. He'd redirected those deposits into a holding account he controlled, claiming it was to cover my medical expenses. He had called my financial advisor and begun asking questions about liquidating my investment accounts. He had listed 2 pieces of furniture from my house on Facebook Marketplace. My grandmother's writing desk and a mid-century credenza I'd spent 3 months hunting for, and sold them for a combined $400. $400. Things that were worth 40 times, that sold in an afternoon, like he was clearing out a storage unit. He told my parents he was simplifying my finances while I recovered. He told my friends who asked that I was resting and not taking calls. He told my neighbors. I found out later that I might be selling the house, and did any of them know a good real estate agent? I didn't know most of this yet when I woke up. What I knew was that his voice through the wall had said her name is already on it, and that something in my gut, even through the morphine, said pay attention. I didn't let on that I'd heard him. When he came in 20 minutes later with my mother and a coffee he didn't offer to share, I kept my eyes soft and my voice weak. I let him explain things to me slowly. The way you explain things to someone you've already decided isn't fully present. He said he'd been handling things. He said I shouldn't worry. He touched my hand in a way that was meant to look caring and felt like a transaction. I said thank you and watched his shoulders drop with relief. The first thing I asked the nurse for, once he and my mother stepped out to get food, was my phone. She hesitated. "You should really be resting." "I know," I said. "I just need to check one thing." She brought it to me from the bedside drawer where they'd stored my personal effects. The screen was cracked from the accident, but it still worked. I opened my banking app first. My checking account had been accessed. A transfer out to an account I didn't recognize, roughly the amount of 1 month's hospital copay. That might have looked reasonable to someone who didn't know that my insurance had a $2,000 annual out-of-pocket maximum, and I'd already met it twice over before he touched anything. I closed the app. I opened my property management portal. The rental deposits from the duplex had been rerouted. I could see the redirect timestamp, 4 days after my accident. I put the phone face down on my chest and stared at the ceiling tiles and breathed. I'm a forensic accountant. I have spent 11 years learning to read financial documents the way other people read novels. For plot, for character, for the places where the story doesn't quite add up. I know what financial exploitation of a family member looks like. I have testified about it in depositions. I have helped prosecutors build cases around it. I knew, lying in that hospital bed, exactly what I was looking at. I also knew that if I said a word to my brother before I had documentation, he would move fast and I would lose everything that was left. So I said nothing. I let my mother fluff my pillow. I let my brother tell me about the tough decisions he'd been navigating on my behalf. I made my voice tired and grateful. And every night after visiting's hours ended, I worked. The nurses thought I was watching television. I was building a file. I had a secondary email account, one I set up years ago for sensitive client correspondence, stored only on a device my brother didn't know existed. I had backed up that login to my phone's password manager, which he couldn't access without my face. I used that account to contact my financial advisor directly, bypassing whatever story my brother had told her. She was alarmed. She had fielded 2 calls from him and had been about to comply with a liquidation request because he'd presented the POA documentation, and she'd been given no reason to believe it was being misused. I told her to freeze everything and document every contact he'd made. She did it within the hour. I contacted my property management company with a written directive, authenticated with security questions only I knew, to halt the redirect and restore deposits to my account, done by morning. I called my own attorney, not my brother's contact. Mine. A woman I'd used for my house purchase and kept in my phone because she was sharp and didn't waste words. I explained the situation. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Send me everything you have. I'll start the POA challenge Monday." Then I called the garage. That's the part no one knew about. When I renovated the detached garage into my home office, I'd had a contractor install something extra. Not hidden exactly, it was permitted and on file with the city, but not obvious either. Behind the built-in bookshelf on the north wall, there was a reinforced access panel. Inside, a small fireproof cabinet bolted to the concrete slab. In it, I kept physical backups of everything. Original deed to the house. Original deed to the duplex. My grandmother's will and the codicil that left her writing desk specifically to me. Hard copies of every financial account with account numbers and institution contacts. A USB drive with encrypted backups updated every 90 days. I kept it there because I work in financial forensics. I know that digital records disappear, get overwritten, get contested. I know that when someone wants to erase your paper trail, they start with what's easy to find. They can't easily find a bolted fireproof cabinet behind a bookshelf in a converted garage. I called the contractor who built it. He was also the only other person who knew it existed. I asked him to go to the house, retrieve the USB drive, and bring it to his office for safekeeping until I was discharged. He didn't ask many questions. He'd done similar things for clients before. He worked a lot with people in protective occupations. He messaged me 2 hours later with a photo of the drive in his hand. Intact. Everything's still there. My brother had been in my house. I could tell from the photos my neighbor texted me when I asked her to take a quiet walk past. Different curtains in the living room, some boxes visible through the front window, the garage door slightly ajar in a way I never left it. He'd been inside probably multiple times. He hadn't found the cabinet. He hadn't thought to look behind the bookshelf. I stayed quiet for 2 more weeks. I'm not going to pretend that was easy. There were nights I lay in that hospital bed, with my ribs aching and my phone in my hand, reading transfer records, and I wanted to call him. I wanted to call my mother and ask her how she let this happen. I wanted to ask my father, who had never once intervened in anything my brother did, whether he understood what was happening under his roof of trust and family, and were just taking care of things. But I know how confrontation works in our family. He would have doubled down, covered his tracks faster, involved my parents in a way that made them feel implicated, made this about family loyalty instead of what it actually was, which was fraud. Clear, documentable, prosecutable fraud. So I waited. I got better. I started physical therapy for the pelvis. I smiled at my brother when he visited and said things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you," and he glowed each time, which told me everything I needed to know about why he was doing it. It wasn't about money, not entirely. It was about finally being the one who held the keys. I was discharged on a Thursday. My attorney filed the POA challenge that same afternoon, citing specific evidence of misuse: the redirected rental income, the unauthorized liquidation request, the sale of property identified in my grandmother's will as a direct bequest. I didn't tell my brother any of this was coming. He found out when his attorney called him. He called me 20 minutes later. His voice was controlled, but there was something shaking underneath it. "Meredith, what is this?" "It's a legal filing," I said. "You've had it explained to you. You're suing your own brother. I'm correcting an estate mismanagement situation." I said it exactly the way I would say it to a client. Neutral, technical, true. He tried a few more angles: the "we're family" angle, the "I was just trying to help" angle, the "you were unconscious and someone had to" angle. I let him talk. I've sat across from embezzlers in depositions who said almost identical things. The framing shifts, but the core is always the same. I had access, I had need, and I told myself a story about why it was okay. When he finished, I said, "I have documentation for every transaction you made under that POA. My financial advisor has logged every call you made to her. My property management company has the redirect timestamps. The Facebook marketplace listings for my grandmother's desk are still live. I have the original will codicil. I have everything. And what I filed today is civil, not criminal. Whether it stays civil is going to depend on how the next 30 days go." He hung up. My mother called an hour later. She was crying, the real kind, not my sister-in-law's performed kind. She asked me if this was really happening, and I said yes. She said she didn't know. I believed her, mostly. I said I know. I said that didn't make it better, but I know. My father didn't call. Civil court in Tennessee moved faster than I expected, partly because the documentation was so clean. My attorney described it later as almost unusually tidy. Every transaction traceable, every authorization time-stamped, every communication logged. The forensic accountant they hired to review the records on the other side was thorough. But there was nothing to find in my favor to contest. My brother had moved money I could prove was mine into an account I could prove he controlled. He had sold property I could prove was a direct bequest. He had redirected income streams I could prove belonged to me. The judgment came down 6 weeks after I filed. Full restitution. The redirected rental income returned. The liquidation request that had been stopped before it executed. No loss there, but documented as attempted misuse. The proceeds from the furniture sale, he actually had to produce those, all $400 of them, which felt almost insulting in its smallness, but I took them because they were mine. My grandmother's writing desk was gone. The man who bought it had already refinished it. My attorney sent him a letter explaining the circumstances, and he offered it back at his purchase price, plus what he'd spent on the refinishing. I paid it without hesitation. It's sitting in my office now, in front of the window. I work at it every morning. The criminal investigation is ongoing. I'll say only that. Ongoing. The thing people don't understand about financial exploitation within families is how much of it depends on the assumption that you won't document. That love, or the remnant of love, or the performance of it, creates enough loyalty that you'll absorb the loss and move on. My brother understood something about family dynamics and tried to use it. What he didn't account for was that I'd spent a decade learning to read the exact shape of that assumption and build systems that didn't rely on it. I wasn't prepared because I expected him to do this. I was prepared because I knew him. There's a difference. The duplex is still mine, the house is still mine, the cabinet behind the bookshelf is still there, restocked and rebolted, updated with new documents and a new USB drive. My contractor added a secondary lock at no charge. He said he was glad it worked. My brother and I don't speak. My parents and I are in a careful, quiet place that I don't have a word for yet. Not estrangement, not reconciliation, something in between that might take years to name. My mother sends me recipes sometimes. I send her photos of my dog. It's not nothing. My sister-in-law sent a letter once that was 4 pages long and mostly about how hard this had been on her. I read it once and filed it. I still drive past Vanderbilt sometimes when I'm in that part of the city. I don't know why. I think I need to keep it visible. That building, those parking structures, that unremarkable stretch of Medical Center Drive, as proof that I came out of something real and didn't let it take what I'd built. I worked 2 jobs through grad school. I sat for the CPA exam while living in a 1-bedroom apartment with a window that stuck shut in summer. I built my client base from nothing, referral by referral, until I had enough to buy the craftsman and fill it with furniture I chose, and art I loved, and a dog who sleeps on the foot of my bed and has no idea that any of this happened. They thought the accident erased me. They thought the morphine and the machines and the tube down my throat meant I was already somewhere past the point of fighting back. I woke up calculating, and the cabinet is still there, behind the bookshelf, bolted to the floor, for anyone who needs a reminder that some things can't be taken if you build them right.